Well, hello and welcome to Circus History Live. My name is Bruce Hawley. I'm president of the Circus Historical Society. Circus History Live is produced monthly by the CHS. Tonight's episode features circus aerialist and equestrian extraordinaire and 2008 Circus Ring of Fame inductee Sylvia Zerbini. And now here's the host of Circus History Live, CHS Vice President Chris Berry. Chris?
Thanks, Bruce, and Sylvia, thanks for joining us. Sylvia Zerbini comes from 9-generation circus family, and she's been performing since she was 13 years old. Her Italian father, Tarzan, her French mother, Jacqueline, immigrated to the United States in the early 1960s, and while her father trained horses and wild animals, her mother was an aerialist, which kind of set up a combination of what was ahead for her and her future. So, Sylvia, welcome to Circus History Live today. And let's talk a little bit about specifically you and growing up in Sarasota. I mean, you were always around the circus, right?
Yes, first of all, thank you so much for having me, inviting me to this discussion and talking about circus history. And obviously, I know a lot about that, the 9 generations. Growing up in Sarasota was an amazing time and experience. It was, it was completely normal for me. It was my home, and my backyard was a circus, literally.
So, one of the things I mentioned earlier, your dad, which, by the way, today, the day that we're taping this, June the 25th, is your dad's birthday. So, 80, what is he, 83 now?
Yes, sir. 83. He's in Toronto, Ontario, and they were actually setting up the big top, and they open Thursday, and he'll do probably a 3-week run there in Ontario before carrying back on to the United States.
That is fantastic. One of the things that makes you unique, I think, as a performer, and one of the things we're going to talk about today is the fact that you really were one of the first people to mix aerial and equestrian work in a performance. And as a result, you won a number of awards, including in Monaco, the Cup of Monaco, which Prince Rainier gave you. Obviously, you've continued to perform in a lot of really unusual environments. And before we get going here, I'm just going to show just a little snippet of what you would have seen if you had gone to see Kaleidoscape, which was where we really saw that first combination of the aerial and the equestrian work. So let's see if we can roll this here. So obviously, beautiful trapeze work here, and then there you are with the horses too.
Yeah. That was a great little tour that we did for Feld Entertainment.
Yeah, it was really an unusual show, and I know you once said it was almost like being in Monaco every night.
Yes, the atmosphere that Mr. Felt created with a team of excellent, workers and so forth, they just made the experience so magical. It was really up close, personal, and the magic that was created. And the best thing about that whole experience was just being so close to the audience, because yes, I did work in a one ring environment before, but the way that Kaleidoscape was produced and the way that it was presented in such a manner that it almost felt like a theater. It was really, really beautiful setting, and it made you feel really amazing to perform every night.
When we think of you today really primarily as an equestrian, your father didn't really want you to be involved with animals at first, right?
Right. My older sister, which is Patricia Zerbini, is really multi-talented in animal behavior and training. And she just had a natural thing for wild animals. And so, being in a circus family, your children are chosen to whatever best fits them. And my sister obviously was the one that was the strongest and, the oldest. And my father spent a lot of time with her with the wild animals, where I, spent more time taking care of them and doing things more in the background and, focusing more on the aerial work with my mother. But the animals, especially horses, have always been a real deep passion for me.
So tell me a little bit about that first Liberty Act that your dad acquired.
So horses have always been in our family. I remember my mother doing a bareback riding tiger routine, and on a big Clydesdale horse. And we were performing in circuses and had a lot of horses. And I grew up with some of the best equestrians. From Joe Zopi back in the day. They used to do an amazing bareback riding act that we were just young kids, and we'd be training with them, on top of horses. And then we had the Harriets that were always on tour, it seemed like, and always assisted backstage and helping with their horses. And it just growing up in that environment, the Rosaires. I remember Derek Rosaire with Tommy the Wonder Horse. That was an act that I could not get enough of. I had to be there. I would run in the corridors and just watch him. And beautiful Ellie and Duke and Derek used to do like the long line, and she used to do side saddle riding, and it was just so magical. And I just knew that that was something that I always wanted to, do, and that's what I was going to do as I got older.
And things kind of presented themselves in an unusual way when a trainer had to go back to France, right?
Exactly. So learning, the Liberty work. Obviously, my father had a lot of, talent in that department. Even though that wild animal was his specialty, he still, did stuff with the horses. And we had acquired some horses from another show that weren't quite finished, and some newer horses. And we had a French trainer that had come, and like you said, came and started to do some training and then left. And then I ended up finishing the training on my own. And then from there, moved on forward. And I'd run into problems, and we'd have these long conversations from France, to Missouri, because I was in Missouri at the time. And I would tell him the problems I'd be having, and he would give me some pointers on how to do my corrections. But after all said and done, I would kind of do my own thing, and I started training and made up and created my own method and technique that works really well for me up to this day.
One of the things when people watch you with your horses that's really unusual for a woman who has Italian and French heritage is, and you were born in Sarasota, as we said, is you don't speak to those horses in English, do you?
No, I don't. I speak French, and people often ask me that, Sylvia, why do you speak French to the horses? Well, French was my first language. I grew up in our household. My mom was always like, French in the house, you can speak English outside. But I felt like the French language was such a soft language. The tone remained like a nice, even level, where the American language was a lot stronger. And then I felt the energy would change with the horses. And I started noticing earlier on, when I would start to say some things in English, I noticed the response on the horses, because horses are really, really sensitive. And I noticed how a tone was such a huge difference in the training, that it meant so much because it was connecting to the energy. So there is where I decided just to remain with the French language, just because of the fact of how calm the language stays.
So, when you talk about training a horse, I mean, the people, turn of the 20th century, people were very familiar with horses because everybody had a horse. Today, it's much more of a novelty. Most people don't really understand horses. Are they difficult to train?
I don't think so. I feel that horses have their own language, and I feel that it's up to us to pay attention. Like any animal, every animal has its own silent language. And for me now, I feel each horse has a different character. Each horse should be trained differently. You have some horses that are sensitive, some that aren't so sensitive. So, depending on the horse that you're working with, I feel that the training, as long as you stay honest, clean, and clear, and communication and bonding, comes first. And once you establish that communication and a bond, horses are pretty amazing. They pretty much want to do anything for you when you let them understand what you're asking.
So, I've always been interested in kind of how you work with this large group of horses too. First of all, they're Arabians, right? That you mostly
Ye-
work with.
Yes,
So,
yes.
so sometimes when we see a video of you performing, some of these horses they're like bay or roan. They're dark horses, but they actually change colors, don't they, as they get older?
So yeah, so the Arabians, they tend to be a romy color. Some are pretty gray, some are very dark, and as they get older, they turn completely white. Some will get dapple, flea bitten, specks on them as they age. Oop, I lost you. And
Nope.
but it really, yes, they do change colors, especially when you're working with grays.
And these obviously these look almost like they're blue that we're looking at here because the lighting is such. But what beautiful animals, and getting them to stand up, like a lipizan. This all comes through really that positive reinforcement, right?
Absolutely. And I'm so blessed to be, nine generation circus family. Real circus people have always put their animals first. And it's an art. Animal training, horse training in the circus life, the way I was brought up has always been an art, and it was always first with respect to the animal that you were working with, the respect to the horse. So I feel that I'm so happy that I had that foundation of always doing the right thing for our horses, and being an aerialist and combining the two arts together. I never asked my horses to do more if I couldn't do it. So I kind of treated them like me. I was very possessive and controlling. I didn't want a lot of people handling my horses. And that's why I made sure that I was always there. And, if I could do 3 shows a day, I knew my horses could do 3 shows a day. If I felt that we had to travel and I was up driving, if I could, stay awake, then I would treat my horses almost like they were part of me, and I always felt the respect back from the horses, especially when we had to do a lot of shows. I would preserve them mentally, so I never demanded 100% every show. I would, you know, if we worked 7 shows in one week or 10 shows, I would have maybe asked for perfection for 3 shows. The other shows, I would let some things, go. I wouldn't be as clean, not that the audience could tell, but I gave my horse a mental break. And working, anywhere from 8 to 12 horses, I've worked up to 16 horses. I learned how to individually connect to them. So if I had a number 4 horse that, for instance, didn't do a pirouette that first show, would I make him do it again in performance? No, but I would give him a tone with an energy that was like, not a good idea, and that horse would remember that tone, where then in the next performance, I could call his name and give him, a pre-cue, like just call his name in a tone that's like, pay attention. And I would call my pirouettes and boom, he would, give it to me. So I learned early on not to overtrain. I felt that performance was enough. I felt as long as they got a lot of exercise and kept them conditionally, fit, that the mental part was always the hardest part to maintain. And by working so many shows, the horses kind of taught me my limits and my boundaries on when to push, when not to push.
So, you talked a little bit about growing up in Sarasota, being around the trapeze. Your mother, of course, a great actress. And then in the late 1990s, Kenneth Feld had this idea of putting on a one ring circus that was really going to be under canvas. Tell me a little bit about how you were approached to change your act a little bit, and combine the two things. And I'm
The
gonna
two
roll a video of this while you're telling us about this too. This is actually, folks, a video from Kaleidoscape, which shows you Sylvia working both the trapeze and the horses simultaneously.
Yeah, that was a really unique concept. I did a pretty taxing trapeze act. I didn't wear any safety devices, no gimmicks. I did heel catches and hung by my toes. And when I would come down, I would enter the ring of the horses. But I had to have total focus on my aerial work. It was, you know, I've fallen a couple times. And so I really had to be in a state of mind where I just totally concentrated on my aerial work. And I felt the most challenging part was trying not to start to think about the horses while I was still up in the air, because I would tend to, you know, be going through my routine and go, oh, don't forget, you know, number 4, watch out because he's eyeing number 3, you know, and you try to get ahead of your problems so you're prepared, because I always said with horsework, timing is everything. You know, your timing is key for everything that I did in my liberty. So if you catch them in the thought process, you know, you can kind of lead the way of what's going to happen. And so that was the most challenging part. But you know, it was a good probably, you know, 12-minute, if not longer, aerial and horse work combined together. But that was, you know, Mr. Felt's Kenneth's idea to combine the two. And he was like, Sylvia, what do you think? And I was like, absolutely. You know, anything new to try, I was always on board.
It was a very spectacular act, and really, as I said, something that people had not seen before. You're watching Circus History Live. This is our monthly get together with those who are involved in circus history of the past and present. And fortunately, we have Sylvia Zerbini, Circus Ring of Fame winner, who's with us today to talk about that career. I want to talk a little bit about after you were really one of the stars of Kaleidoscape. Then you went over, actually, before you went to the Blue Unit. I'm going to bring in, this is kind of like This Is Your Life. I'm going to bring in Wayne McCary here, who I know you have a long friendship with. Wayne, if you could unmute your microphone here. Welcome to the call.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks,
Yay.
Wayne. So Wayne McCary, here's you and Sylvia. This Is Your Life.
Okay. We talked a lot here about Sylvia's tremendous equestrian abilities, and I have great respect for it. However, I would focus more on her single trapeze. That was really what attracted me to Sylvia's performances in the first place. I would consider Sylvia's single trap act probably the best trapeze act during my lifetime in the circus business. As an example, I always admired the fact that if you saw Sylvia, for instance, on Kaleidoscape, or you came and saw her performing at the Big E or on a Hannaford show or someplace else, you saw the same performance. She never skipped a beat, no matter where she performed. And as an example, it's tough going. I never told her this when we were contracting, but I don't think she had done too many 3-show-a-day performances until she landed at the Big E. And one of the seasons that she did it was over 90 degrees in the tent, 3 shows a day for 17 consecutive days with no time off. And it happened that part of the run, she also had a fever, pretty high fever. In spite of all those challenges, she never skipped a beat. And I think one of the great things was, again, one ring environment, people, nobody further than 50 feet from the center of the ring. And Sylvia always had an amazing ability with all the skill she needed to complete her performance, especially the aerial performance. She never lost eye contact or a relationship with the audience. So that's a little bit about her with a single trap act. And I always used to kid her about the horses. I said, you know, you'd be a lot better off if you'd had a juggling act. So you wouldn't have to worry about all that livestock. But without a question, Sylvia, in every respect, is definitely one of the premier artists of my lifetime in the circus industry.
Well, that's very impressive coming from you, Wayne, because you've seen a lot of circus acts. Sylvia, what was it like working at the Big E and doing all those shows? Kaleidoscape was basically one show a day.
Yeah, that thank you, Wayne, Mr. McCary, for those kind words. But you also were one of the best places to work for. When I knew I was going to the Big E, I was beyond excited because I knew you only hired the best of the best. So then I considered myself to be, nearly in that same level as the rest of, my peers. And you always treated every single performer that ever worked for you like a rock star. And when you get treated like that, when you're with a company and they treat you so amazing, you're going to do your best. From the first show to the last show, you give 100% just because of the environment that I think that Wayne created for all of us artists. It was a challenging, tough run, but it was just always such a pleasure. And Mr. McCary has always been my complaint department. So through the years, going to all these big, shows and handlings of big contracts and, language that was just so beyond my imagination. And it felt like I was reading a book and Wayne was always just, I'd go into the office and we would get together with a lawyer and we would like nail it all out. And thanks to Mr. McCary, he's gotten some of the best contracts for me. So yeah, I can't appreciate you more than what I do today. Thanks again.
Sylvia, tell them the truth. Tell them about what happened to you at the Big E during that run.
Do you mean the part when from hanging by one toe, I had such a big hole that I still have a scar till this day?
Yeah, that's
yes,
it.
Yes, that's absolutely. And I always show Ambra that. I'm like, Ambra, do you see this foot? That's from Mr. McCary. Actually, last time she worked for you in Indianapolis, we had a big laugh about that. But yep, that was for sure. I still have that scar too.
Your daughter, Ambra.
Yes.
So, I want to talk a little bit. So after that, at least that first kind of experience there at the Big E, you're still with the Feld organization. You go on tour with the Blue Unit. The train was obviously still being used at that time, but you never took the train because of all your horses. Tell me a little bit about that transportation going between towns, especially on the second year of the route.
It was challenging, but it's like we had a routine. It was set routine. My husband drove the horse trailer, and I had a big motor coach. I had a big, huge concert coach with a car trailer that pulled the car. And we would finish at the end of the show. We would load up our horses and we would head out to the next city. And as soon as we'd get there, we'd be able to unload or we'd go to equestrian centers. But I just always felt that, like I said before, my animals were, my family. And I always wanted them around. And being on the train, there was less control. And being a little bit of a control freak, I always wanted to be in charge of my stuff. So I always kept the horses with us.
So the horses that you had horses for many years too, and you even had horses that did not perform because you didn't want to leave them at home just in the event something were to happen to that horse, right?
Right. So like now I have a retired horse, and if I go to a venue long enough, that retired horse comes with me. Obviously now that I have 18 horses, that's a little bit hard to do, but I went in 2014-15 to Tennessee to work there for an equestrian show. And Igor Kasayas was the director. And I actually brought 3 of my retired horses, and there was a beautiful boarding facility with these green, lush, Tennessee pastures. And for the whole time that we were there, my retired horses, I had my one of my trainers that trains with me bring my horses up to this equestrian park. And at the end of my tour, I had, that person that works for me come back and pick the horses up. So yeah, I just always felt that was my obligation. We were like a big team.
So when you train a horse at your farm there in Florida, for example, they're not really used to performing in front of an audience or the lighting or the music and things like that. How do you prepare them for that kind of experience? Because they're not necessarily performing all the time, right?
They're not, I just added, I actually have a couple of Cavalia's horses that are here since the pandemic. And they were a challenging bunch. They actually had me fly to their tour and, bring my team, work my team on tour during the shows, and then I'd be fixing their existing Liberty team. And those horses were, prepared in a different manner that I wasn't used to. So they had no confidence in the person. They had absolutely no confidence, and that's where I go back to my philosophy and my, my ways of training. That's the first thing that I teach my horse is, they absolutely have confidence and they trust me. And when you have built that relationship, the horses are pretty much, yeah, well, they get a little bit worried and get distracted. But overall, they understand that, I'm their comfort zone and I'm there to protect them. And I normally have really good shows, even with some really young new horses.
Yeah, it's really when you look at the horses that you use, and you use stallions too, right? Does that create additional problems for you?
I do. When I first started, I had a couple stallions, and then I never believed in gelding a horse unless it absolutely had to. If there was a health issue, or if you just get some stallions that are so extremely hot. But I just try to always do my best to work with them, and in my ways of training, and my philosophy and my methods are completely different than anybody I know. It's just like a homemade, energy thing that happens. And I'm able to work my stallions absolutely, free in a 300 by 200 arena. Is it easier to work with geldings? Absolutely. But the challenge of being able to control stallions is rewarding for me. I really appreciate their characters and their strength, but I also appreciate how they trust me in leading them through these routines in this big space. Sometimes there's some young ones that I do put muzzles on them so they can't bite the other horse, because sometimes being kind of far from you, it's hard to control. um, so there's sometimes there's that challenging part where one stallion will try to run after another, but nothing to the point where, if you would think, oh my gosh, what can a stallion do to another stallion, can be really damaging to one horse or the other.
Really interesting. We talked a little bit, and I want to kind of get into this a little bit more. You train a horse for a circus ring, traditionally 42 feet in diameter. But I'm going to show a video here of kind of what you have been doing more recently, where you're not in the circus ring, and kind of explain to us. I mean, these horses, they're running wild. So let's take a look at this and kind of tell us what it is that we're watching here.
So, yeah, so there's a stallion. He's actually the 2019 Breyer horse. So this horse has a toy model of him, and he's actually a stallion that was given to me because the only thing he could do is rear. And he worked with me the last 2 years on Ringling Brothers, and then he actually came with me to Cavalia. And I learned a lot going by Cavalia, like you said, working, in a 40-foot perimeter ring, and then going to, 200 by 300 arenas became challenging. But when I first, joined the Cavalia troupe, I remember Norman Latourell's words, saying, Sylvia, I've come to see you perform, with the Ringling Brothers. And I really felt your connection with your horses and really admired how your horses loved you. And he goes, when he hired me, he goes, I noticed that your horses all lined up like soldiers, and, you did a triple hind leg walk. He goes, for the Cavalia show, I really don't want you, lining up all your horses like little soldiers. I really want them to be themselves, really want them to be their own character. If one's a little back or one's a little forward, he says, it's all about the horse. And it just made so much sense to me because all my life I always tried to keep everything super straight, and there was always these, rules that, Liberty trainers in the circus, horses had to be all in line, and they was just these little things that I always like would religiously do, make sure the horses lined up. And when I went to Cavalia and that kind of all disappeared, he didn't want the horses all lined up. He wanted them more free and wild. I felt that when I started to perform night over night on Cavalia in a big area and a big distance, I felt sometimes the further I was, the more attention I got from them. And then I noticed how body position on certain parts of the horse from a distance meant something again, and I noticed this when I was a child as well. But I started using all that technique in my training to be able to control those horses in the big arena. And I found that the horses were happier running free. So what my act consists of is, turning them out, having, them disorganized and, just running around like crazy horses. And then all of a sudden I start organizing them. And then I ask them to do something. They do it. Then I disorganize them. I just let them be. Then I ask for their attention again. And then they'll check back in. And, they would come in and, I'd call 4 of them in. I'd stop. I would send the other ones out and, do all kinds of different patterns. But I always let them disorganize themselves. And a lot of times my circus peers will go, Sylvia, why are your horses so disorganized? And I was like, well, I feel that's the part of the beauty is to disorganize them, let them be, let them show their characters, and then slowly organize them back together and seeing the willpower of the horse wanting to come back to please you and do a waltz or, or a stop or a backup for you or a lay down. I felt brought even more magic to the audience because they could feel how happy the horses were and got to witness a live herd reacting with one another.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So what is the most horses you've ever worked at one time?
I want to say it was, I do 16 here at my farm, but I did do in 2018, I did do 15 for Cavalia. I was working 15 right before they closed the show. Like I said earlier, that I had gone back to work my team while I fixed their team. Well, towards the end of that tour, I had all their teams back, and their new horses working on stage. And I had a total of 15 horses there.
So transport, I mean, you know, having that large of an act, you're responsible basically for 15 children. You can't really go on vacation, can you, Sylvia?
No, it's a big commitment. It's not like a suitcase, like where sometimes I think of Wayne's words, about taking my suitcase and then just going from town to town. But it's a big responsibility. It's a big commitment having, these many animals. And, when I was working with Ringling Brothers, all your expenses paid. They gave us the best of care for the horses and same with Cavalia. And then being independent, there's really no more shows out there, traveling shows that, can accommodate so many horses. So that's why I choose to stay in one place and do my shows here at the farm and do independent stuff for the World Equestrian Center. But it is challenging, and it is hard because feed keeps going up, and it's just a big, huge responsibility.
So you're watching Circus History Live. Our guest is Sylvia Zerbini. Circus History Live is a monthly presentation where we take a look at circus history, talk to the people who have made it. And I want to remind you, this taping is actually happening in June of 2023. Our annual convention is coming up August 24th through the 27th in Bloomington, Illinois. If you're not a member of the Circus Historical Society already, I encourage you to join. And if you are a member, we look forward to seeing you in Bloomington. Tell me a little bit about this. I mean, you're teaching these horses to stand on their hind legs. This is not something that they're accustomed to doing, right? In normal life.
Well, actually, horses do stand up in normal life. And this character that you're looking at on your screen, that horse I got for practically nothing, because that's all he wanted to do was walk on his hind legs. So that becomes my job to figure out what horse likes to do what. I have one horse that likes to lay down. That's going to be my lay down horse. Rico here loves to walk on his hind legs. He's very powerful. He's strong. And, as soon as he would be intimidated or he wanted to show off when I first got him, that's all he would do is stand on his hind legs. So we ended up making a game out of it. And so I try to choose the characters for their job. It's the same like how I was treated on the single trapeze. I knew my strong points and I knew what I could and could not do. And I know what my horses can and cannot do. And that's the how I start my training.
If you have a question for Sylvia, we'd encourage you to put something in the chat. The chat is found at the bottom of your screen there. I know probably everybody has questions for you because most of us don't spend a lot of time with horses, but you actually bring
most of us don't spend a lot of time with horses.
Don't know, somebody at the
just every week and minute.
Oh, is that Richie?
No.
So anyway, if you have a question, if you put it in the chat, that would be great. Then we'll try to get to them. But you spend a lot of time with horses yourself, Sylvia. You bring them out to the farm. You bring people out and you train people. Tell us about what happened just this past week when you were in the middle of a training session, because I think that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so I'm here at the Grand Liberty Farm, which is a 10-acre farm that houses, 18 horses. We have client horses that come.
No, that's the Zoom.
Coming in every day. Can you hear me?
You could mute your microphones, please. Go ahead.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yes. So here at Grand Liberty Farm, we're home to 18 horses. So I also have boarding horses, client horses that come in. And so I do probably about six lessons a week. And they bring their horses here to the farm. Sometimes there's problem horses that'll stay longer, horses that have very strong characters. But on Friday, we were in the arena and we've been experiencing intense downpours. And I had a client in the arena and I had a schooling horse that was in, a young schooling horse. And the thunder, hit. And just as I turned my head, I seen a lightning come across the farm and actually hit the pole that was exactly 8 feet from where I was standing with the client and the horse. Yes, we were in a covered arena, but it blew up our whole, sound system, our lighting system. The horse got so petrified, he kind of ran away. We were scared. It just started hitting like 5 more cracks all the way around the facility. And so that's why I'm not on a computer right now, because we have absolutely no internet and we're doing it on the phone. So yeah, that horse got completely sidetracked, but within 2 minutes, I wasn't even acknowledging him. He came running back over and like stayed with me like he was a dog or something. He didn't want to leave. But we do lessons here.
A couple of questions here. One of them is, and we sort of talked about this a little bit earlier, because it is difficult to travel with a large horse act. There was a time, even back in the 1950s, when some of the big circuses didn't have a horse act on it at all. I know that if you look at the population of horses in the United States, it's actually higher now than it was even 20 or 30 years ago. There are actually more horses. But what do you think the future is of horse acts in general? I mean, I saw the Hannafords are bringing back their riding act now. It's a commitment, like you said. What do you think?
What do I think? I think what the horses brings, especially in a circus, in your traditional arenas where you can see liberty work or horse work. I think it brings magic to our audience. Um, is it a challenging time to have that many horses? Absolutely. The expense on horses is just it's beyond words what it costs to be able to feed horses and to transport them. There's unfortunately no more shows that they can probably, handle one or two horses, but to handle big teams like what I have, I don't know what the future holds. I know in Europe they've got a lot more equestrian performances and equestrian shows, but with Cavalia being shut down, and we were supposed to be going to Vegas, do residency in Vegas, and that kind of has been on standstill for the last going on 4 years now. And I hope it comes back, but as of right now, it's kind of scary.
Well, the Castle Writing Act won the Gold Clown in Monte Carlo this past year. Again, a European act, spectacular because
Yes.
of the fact that they did something that most people have not seen today.
Yes, yeah, I agree. And they're so fortunate to have these amazing shows to go work on. But unfortunately, here in the United States, I don't feel like we have those big production shows anymore. And a lot of shows that are out there don't want any more animal acts. So
Yes.
I feel, yeah, kind of sad that I hope that it's not a dying art as far as our animals go.
Well, when you and Steve Gossard brought up a kind of an interesting thought here. You started up obviously on a trapeze as a child, really moved to horses. Both of those disciplines really require a lot of commitment and really attention to concentration. Which one's harder, doing the trapeze or training the horses?
You have the mental challenge of training horses, and then you have the physical challenge of the aerial work. The combination for me was perfect because it challenged me in both areas. Um, the responsibility and the mental part of the horses is really difficult. But like I said, I think it's the combination for me. Um, if I had to choose which one was the hardest, I'd probably say the horse training, because you've got so many individual characters that you have to make sure are, sound, happy, healthy, and most of all, enjoying their life. And that's my responsibility. So I would have to say that the horses are.
You're the ninth generation circus family, the 10th generation. Your daughter is now performing on the trapeze. Also, do you think that she will eventually take after her mom and start working with horses?
So Ambra is an amazing artist. She's done everything with working with the aerial hoop into the horses, and she's done all that, but she's kind of retired out of the business. She is the main agent for the sales of Marine Max, which is a big yacht company, and she handles the region of Marine Max. So she's got an amazing job, that she's got amazing people skills. And I just actually spent the last 2 days with her, and she took us out on this amazing boat. And, she'll come here to the farm and she'll play around on the aerial hoop, because we do classes here 3 times a week. We have aerial fitness, and she'll come and she'll play on the hoops and stuff. And if she would ever decide that she would want to do it again, I know it would take her no time, because it's in her blood, it's in her genes, and it's something that's very natural for her. So I hope she continues the path that she's going down right now, because she seems very happy. And with our business, not as big as it was, I think for right now, where she's at is a great place.
That's terrific. Deb Ruiz has kind of an interesting question here. We think of a lot of times we give our pets names, right? These horses have names too, probably. You referred a little while ago to the number 4 horse or whatever. When you're training them, do you call them by name, or how do they know in a group who you're talking to?
Absolutely. So every individual horse knows their name. You know, if you've got 10 horses running around and I need one to come to me, I got to be able to call his name. He needs to know who he is. You know, if I need to call my number 6, and that happens to be Bisou, I'm going to go Bisou, and he's going to look at me like, yes. And then I give him a cue to come. But absolutely, the verbal cues and their names are so important.
Does it matter if it's one syllable or two? I know you had a horse Moon for a long time.
I'm sorry.
Does it need to be a one syllable? Or you said Bisou, you had Moon. Does it really matter for them?
It doesn't matter. For their names, it doesn't matter. Obviously, when I'm doing cues, one syllable is better because the brain tends to collect that one tone, that one word. That sometimes if you say good, memory, that brain just collects that good energy in that tone. But sometimes if you say good boy, good girl, that the brain doesn't collect that much information. Sometimes, especially Arabians, their brains on to the next step. So I try to be careful with the amount of syllables that I use in my cue words. Absolutely.
So we've talked about the future of horse work. We've talked about the future of the circus a little bit, but people are still very interested in really watching these powerful, beautiful animals perform. You're going to keep doing it, I guess, for a long time to come, right?
I hope so. I sincerely hope so. We're gonna try and grow the equestrian show here at my farm at Grand Liberty Farm. Make it a real up close and personal, cavalia kaleidoscape feeling with just a bunch of amazing horses. And we'll try to be doing shows on the weekends, and hopefully people come out and see us and help support the art of Liberty work.
So again, folks, if you're in the Ocala area, not only do you have a chance to come out to your farm, but also your sister's Two Tails Ranch is still operating too, right?
Yes, absolutely. Patricia has an amazing elephant farm, and she educates the people on the well-being of the elephants and a little bit of history on how the elephants are and what they can do. And she executes. They paint, they pull logs, and it's really a nice family-oriented tour to spend a half a day there at Two Tails Ranch here in Williston, Florida.
So Williston, Florida, that's the place to go next time you're down there. Sylvia Zerbini, I want to thank you again for joining us on this episode of Circus History Live. I think that your contributions will long be remembered. You really are a tremendous artist, and we're pleased that you're able to join us and talk to us a little bit about it. Bruce, I'm going to turn it back over to you now.
Thank you, Chris.
And thank you, Chris, and thank you, Sylvia, and thank you, Wayne. This was a tremendous program. I hope that everyone listening and watching enjoyed it. I learned so much, and it's just wonderful that you were willing to share with us your history, the history of your family, and what you do to make it entertaining for all of us. And again, it's just wonderful to have you on the program. Wayne, did you have any final comments before we signed off?
No, I just Sylvia, you did a terrific job, and I didn't expect any less.
Thank you, Mr. McCary. Thank you, Bruce. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Chris, final words?
We'll see you down the road next month with another episode of Circus History Live.
See you down the road. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.